Saturn is the key in so many ways to what is happening with all its moons. Just a reminder, Saturn may appear to be what it is in the holographic world, but actually, again, it's an information field. It is a consciousness. Everything is aware. Everything has a consciousness. So these planets and suns, they have consciousness. They have awareness. They are entities in their own right. And interestingly, this is an accepted ancient symbol of the sun. And people think, understandably, that it's a symbol of the sun that we know today. But is that symbol more likely to be the sun we know today or the sun we once knew? Saturn. Saturn is the key to understanding so much. It was known as the old sun. It is known in occult as the old sun, the dark sun, and the dark lord, the Lord of the Rings. And the massive penny drop for me, whoa, the kaleidoscope moved when I started to realize that at least so many, if not all, the ancient sun gods were not gods of the sun we know today, but of the Saturn sun that was focused on before, because it was in a different position. Saturn has long been symbolized as an eye. There's the eye in Freemasonry. There's the eye of Sauron in the Lord of the Rings, the reptilian eye, the symbol of the negative force. And what happened in the massive and brilliant work of David Talbot in the Saturn myth is that at some point there was an enormous ejection of debris in an explosion out of Saturn. And it formed like a luminous crescent because it reflected light at certain points of the day. And this, as the Earth moved on its axis, when viewed from the Earth, this appeared to move around Saturn. And at different points, there are different symbolism for different points. But this was the one that really was the focus of Saturn symbolism, because this was when that luminous crescent was at its most luminous during the day. And so you find this symbol over and over in the ancient world. And this is a common recurring theme of Saturn. And this, the crescent symbolically, and the disk of the Saturn sun, the dwarf star. And so from this came the horned god, the horned goddess. There is Madonna in her Super Bowl performance at halftime, which was so Saturn in its symbolism, it was laughable, including the fiery eye. And in the movie version of The Lord of the Rings, you had the crescent holding the eye of Sauron. In Arabia, or you look at that of the symbol of Islam, the star, the sun, and the crescent. And the Arabian god Sin was symbolized as a crescent. Here you go. And I would suggest, from David Talbot's point of view, and I think he's right, that this represents the crescent of Saturn. This is the guy who started a satanic Saturn organization or secret society out of Germany called the Brotherhood of Saturn. And there's that symbol of the sun, look, with a dot. That's Saturn, not the sun that we have today, and the horned god. Molech, who is symbolized at Bohemian Grove as the owl, is also symbolized as the bull, and there's the horns with Saturn in the middle. And so you have the bull gods of Mesopotamia. And the winged goddesses in that state, this was often symbolized as the goddess with her holding the god, her arms around the god, or her wings around the god. And there is another version of that with the god Saturn and the crescent. And there it is on the Great Seal of the United States, exactly the same symbolism. There it is in the Air Force Special Operations Command. There it is in the symbol of the House of Windsor. There it is in the United Nations with the target on the world, very appropriately. There it is in the eagle of Rome. Here it is in Freemasonry. The flying disc of Egypt and other places is Saturn. And thus you have the Rosicrucian order, which connects into this network, using that flying disc symbolism. And so many of these logos carry the same symbolism. And in her Super Bowl performance, Madonna had the flying disc of Saturn. This is another ancient Saturn symbol because at some points, apparently it seemed to give off 4 very distinct lights, which became known as the 4 corners or the 4 rivers or the 4 ways. And so you find it, because of these bloodlines connecting into all these institutions, you find it in the Roman Church, you find it on the mace in the Houses of Parliament, you find it on the crown, you found it in the Celtic cross, and you find it in one of the major secret societies in the network, the House of Malta. It's known as the Maltese cross. It was also symbolized, this Saturn symbol and crescent, as the flying god in his flying boat. This is Horus in his heavenly boat. This is why it's used in the boats used in Freemasonry. This is a Freemasonic building on the Isle of Wight, funnily enough. And that is massive. I'm not saying Annie Lennox knew it was, just let's do this, it'd be a good idea. But that was massively Saturn symbolism when you watched it play out. Then you've got this symbol of the horned god. Again, Saturn, Satan, as it also became known, which is you find with so many politicians. And Pat Robertson, this so-called Christian evangelist, yeah, okay. And talking of horns and horned gods, in astrology, Saturn is connected to Capricorn. And so one of the Saturn symbols is the goat. Pan, the goat god, was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. The god himself is a symbol of Saturn, because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. That is what that is. Baphomet, worshipped by Satanists. It's a symbol of Saturn. And I'm going somewhere with this, because I'm going why they're focused on Saturn. So you have Baphomet. You have Beyonce, the wife of Jay-Z, with this big Baphomet ring, which is performing. You have Baphomet-dressed Lady Gaga, Baphomet-dressed Madonna, and you have Baroness Philippine de Rothschild from the wineries in France with a massive Baphomet necklace. And this is from the front cover of the Saturn myth, with the symbolism described of these lights that went off from Saturn at certain points, with the 4 main ones there. And there it is symbolized on one of these ancient tablets. And in St. Peter's Square, that is a mirror of the way that Saturn symbol looks. And there it is on the thing that he has his biscuit in, there, when he's doing his stuff. Now, this is inside the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street. Great Queen was the name of the Babylonian goddess, in London, because this crescent holding the sphere also became symbolized as twin pillars. And so you have Saturn. There's the crescent being held up by the twin pillars. This is in one of the Freemasonic centers of the world in London. Now, this is fascinating. This is called the Magic Square of Saturn. And it's also, not by coincidence, the Magic Square of Freemasonry. And it's magic because of this reason. If you go that way, that way, that way, that way, or that way, or that way, all the numbers in the 3 blocks in line add up to 15. And in numerology, you keep adding numbers until they become a single number. And so 15 in numerological terms is 6. So 666, 666 in all directions. And the black and white squares, for reasons I'll have to go into in detail in a book, because, there's so much to get through today, also relates to Saturn. And so you have them in Freemasonic temples, black and white squares, and you have them in the major cathedrals, like Westminster Abbey and stuff, because of this connection I'm talking about. And this is a major symbol of Saturn going way back, the six-pointed star. It just so happens to be the very symbol from which we get the name Rothschild, one of the major families in this network, because they used to be called Bauer. They lived in Frankfurt in Germany. But they had this red six-pointed star hexagram on the front of their house, and they changed their name to from Bauer to Red Shield in German, Rothschild, red sign or red shield, Rothschild. So they're named after this very symbol. And it was they that created Israel, not on behalf of Jewish people, on behalf of their bloody agenda that treats Jewish people with as much disdain as any of the rest of us. And so you have their symbol on the flag of Israel. They use the six-pointed star so much in law enforcement. This is on a public building in Toronto, right in the center of the six-pointed star. There's the horned god. There's the sheriff and a medal. There is the six-pointed star representing Saturn on an ancient clay depiction. And there it is on Credo Mutwa's 500 to 1,000-year-old Zulu hand symbol. If you do that on the dollar bill, you get the six-pointed star, and those letters make an anagram of Mason, interestingly. Inside the Great Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street, London, there is the Twin Towers, symbolic of the crescent, and there is Saturn again, the six-pointed star. Now, of course, the Roman Church and Christianity, that is anti-Freemasonry and anti-secret societies because they're naughty, but it's on his bloody fish hat, look, right? They're everywhere because the same force is in control. Here you go, I have a bit more Madonna, there you go. And on the Great Seal of the United States, those 13 stars make up a six-pointed star, not by accident. And therefore, again, we keep coming back to this, all these different areas of society are in the end focused on one thing. Satanism is Saturnism. This is Fritz Springmeier, a long-time researcher into this and symbolism, etc., and Satanism. Saturn is an important key to understanding the long heritage this conspiracy has back to antiquity. The city of Rome was originally known as the Saturnia, or City of Saturn. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of Saturn worship in its ritual. Saturn also relates to Lucifer. In various occult dictionaries, Saturn is associated with evil. And this is the remains of the Temple of Saturn in Rome. And just next to this is this place called Capitoline Hill now, but before that called Mons Saturnus, the Hill of Saturn. And this is a very symbolically important place to the bloodlines. Now, the northern pole of Saturn is a permanent storm which takes the form of a hexagon. And this has been found by the Cassini spacecraft, and I think the Voyager one before that in the early 80s. And the hexagon also is an expression of the hexagram, or of the six-pointed star. Because all these different symbols that I'm going to talk about now are different expressions of the same frequency state. So you look at this crop circle from England this year, and it is a hexagon. But a hexagon is a flattened out cube. So when you look at it from another angle, it's a cube. Well, it just so happens that an ancient symbol of Saturn is the cube, especially the black cube. And I would suggest that's what they are. The Kaaba, the focus of worship in Islam, Kaaba means cube. The tefillin, the cube on the head in Judaism. And when people go to worship around the Kaaba, they're told to pray in concentric circles. Remind you of anything? And they're told to walk around it, and their energy can be trawled. And if you focus on something that represents Saturn, Saturn is where the energy goes. In Judaism, they have Solomon's temple. Every syllable of Solomon means the sun. And the Holy of Holies in the so-called Solomon's temple was supposed to be a cube. They talk in Revelation about the New Jerusalem in cube terms. There's these massive cubes that they use. This is outside the one of the banks near Wall Street, near where the protests are. And you see these black cubes and cubes like used by Apple and stuff. Saturn symbolism. In Doctor Who, they had this recent one where the Earth was invaded by black cubes. Star Trek, you had the Borg, who were these cyborg-like, exactly as the are described by the Gnostics of the Archons, and they used to move around in these cubes. If you geometrically represent the cross, then it is a flattened out cube. When you look at the depictions of these people, not Lady Gaga, but others, these religious leaders with the halo, well, that comes from Saturn as well, that halo when that luminous crescent was in that position. Astrologically, that's the symbol of Saturn. And what they symbolized this as was the sickle and the hammer. And when the Rothschilds created the Soviet Union, provable fact if you look at the evidence, they used the symbol of Saturn as the symbol of the Soviet Union. There's that symbol on this guy from the Brotherhood of Saturn. The Jesuits are a major secret society in this global network, and there's the symbol of Saturn in their symbolism very bloody clearly. The snake on the cross also relates to this in some ways. Now, this is going to take us forward here, because the god of Saturn of the Greeks was called Kronos. And Kronos was, because he was the god Saturn, the sickle, the scythe, was represented as holding the scythe, and also he was depicted as the god of time. And he had the beard, the white beard, and he became Old Father Time. That's Kronos, that's the god of Saturn. He also became the Grim Reaper, because Saturn is the planet, I say, son of death. And Kronos became Crown, a symbol of the bloodlines. Kali, a goddess related to Saturn, it was called the Black One, and the goddess of time, depicted with a protruding tongue. There's Madonna again. I mean, she must have the bloody book she works through, this one. The god El, the Hebrew god El, was their god of Saturn. So El and Elohim are demiurge and archons, I would suggest. So we have archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael, another name for Jesus, Emmanuel. We have the Gospels, Chapel, elders, elevated to the priesthood, elections where pawns are elected to serve the elite. We have Isis, Ra, El, all names relating to Saturn. Saturn, Kronos, Satan, Black Sun, Dark Lord, they're all the same thing, the expression of this force. And here you have Moloch, who they worship at Bohemian Grove, and he is a god of Saturn, this recurring theme. They also represent Moloch as a bull, as I said earlier, and so you have that as the symbol of Wall Street. And the golden calf in the Bible is Moloch, Saturn. The Greeks talked about Saturn used to eat his own children. And here's the colors of Satanism and the colors of Saturn, black and red, same as the royal protocol. The robes of the judge, the robes of the clergy, the square hats of universities, the hammer that the judge uses, it's all Saturn symbolism. You see Saturn profusely used in symbolism of the corporate world. And this, this earth, wind and fire, they got the bloody set. There's the eye, there's the six-pointed star, there's the step pyramid, there's the winged disc, and there's bloody Saturn. And then, therefore, you look at religions and secret societies and Satanism, they're worshipping Saturn. Then you look astrologically, in other words, energetically. Banking is astrologically ruled by Saturn. Politics and institutions of state at all levels, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Corporations, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Law and court system, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Science, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Saturn worship, Satan worship. And it's interesting that you have the god of Saturn, Kronos, with the beard, and all these bloody religions, they have bloody beards. And then you have God depicted as a man with a white beard on a cloud or on a throne. And there's God, Charlton Heston type God. That's Yahweh depicted with a beard and stuff. And then we have Santa with the white beard. Santa, anagram of Satan, from Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a festival in Rome where they worshipped the god Saturn. And they gave, it was in the same period to the run-up to our Christmas, and they gave gifts, they decorated trees, and they hung sprigs of bloody holly. So that is Saturn symbolism, a man with a white beard. This is Ancient of Days, a painting by William Blake from, I think, 1794 or something like that. Ancient of Days is an old name for God. And he's depicting God. He was a very deep esoteric thinker and great knowledge, William Blake. And he's depicting God with the white beard. That's Saturn, Kronos. On the GE building in the Rockefeller Center in New York, there's Kronos again. Now, the Freemasons, they call their God the great architect of the universe. The demiurge was known by the Gnostics as the great architect of the universe, which brings us to the white-bearded architect of the Matrix, the Matrix movie series. So where is this leading us? Well, again, this needs to go, if we're going to go anywhere with this, because I'm going into fantastic areas here, but this is where the information has taken me very, very clearly. And the hardest thing to see is what is in front of your eyes, as this man rightly said. The Gnostics talked about the fact that the archons make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience. The Islamic people and pre-Islamic people talk about the jinn manipulating humans by creating illusions. I was in New York in 2010, and someone took me to the subway station for Ground Zero. And when I saw it, it was like, whoa, it hit me big time. There was, first of all, this eyes all along the platforms, but there is this massive depiction of the world on the floor, and then there's an eye, and going out from this eye are these broadcast transmissions. And that hit me so powerfully. Neil Haig was with me, and we kind of looked at each other and said, that's Saturn, isn't it? And remember, physicists have said only this last few days, they may have evidence the universe is a computer simulation. Well, I say that it's a virtual reality, which has been hacked into, and that hack is the reality that we're experiencing, the fake reality. And that hack, I say, comes from Saturn. Because I'm saying that these rings are actually a massive broadcast transmission system which is broadcasting a fake reality within the frequency range that we are decoding, and therefore we are picking up that fake reality. When the Cassini spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004, found many things that was unexplainable, you know, things like the hexagon North Pole storm and stuff like that. But they also found extraordinarily powerful sound coming from Saturn. This is part of what they recorded. Nice, man. And I got sent this by a sound engineer, works in sound engineering for a living, and it's one of the rings of Saturn, and he said, I see that every day. That's bloody sound. They're sound waves. And this is in cymatics. This is a six-pointed star. And of course we have the hexagon going round and round and round at Saturn's North Pole. This is a standing wave created by sound, rings. This is at the South Pole of Saturn, and it's a permanent ice storm. This is a standing wave created by sound. And these are symbols created by sound, like cymatics. And a certain frequency created this perfect six-pointed star with the hexagon in the middle and the hexagon there. Therefore, the sound creates the frequency, creates the symbol, and in the same way, the symbol represents the sound and the frequency. The symbols are just holographic representations of vibrational waveform states. I would suggest in these symbols cases, representatives of the sound frequency coming off Saturn. Same with all these symbols and numerological manipulations. The sound and the symbol are different expressions of the same thing. Thus, if we in the holographic realm are constantly bombarded with these symbols, it is on an energetic level feeding us the frequency field of what they represent. And Saturn, when described pre-cataclysmic, didn't have rings. So where'd they come from? Well, maybe it had rings, but it weren't rings we could see. We can see them now. Well, this guy, Norman Bergeron, has he's in his 90s now, I think. He has a long, long history in space research, technological research, going way back. And his life changed when he started studying the pictures that came back from the Voyager 1 and 2 space expeditions to Saturn. They arrived in 1980 and 81. Because when he studied them, he realized there was something very strange about Saturn's rings. And he said this in his book, The Ringmakers of Saturn. Several years ago, a number of folks in the astronomy and physics world began theorizing that these rings had to be much younger than the universe, perhaps only about 100 million years old. But one pair of pictures shows a change in 5 minutes. An impression is conveyed that the latest reported measurements purport to be the true ones, when in reality, all might quite nearly be correct at the time of observation. General reluctance to accept variable ring system geometry occurs because of apparent failure to identify a physical mechanism suitable for producing recurrent change. In other words, classic mainstream science, if we can't explain it, it doesn't exist. And he also found these in the pictures coming back from Voyager, and the Cassini ones found them too. And he calls them electromagnetic vehicles, and they are massive. Some of them several times bigger than the Earth. But again, we need to move our sense of perception. In terms of size representation, this is the Earth against the size of Saturn. We're not talking the same perception of big in terms of outside of the Earth. And here are some of the other pictures of these electromagnetic vehicles picked up by these NASA craft. Why aren't they all in the papers being talked about? You'd think, what the hell is this? No, nothing. Thanks to Bergeron, we've seen their existence. This is the Hubble telescope. Let's pick one of them up. Look at the size of the bloody thing. And here's a few Cassini spacecraft pictures, still pictures put together. What the hell is that? Exactly what Bergeron was describing from Voyager. And this is the other thing. He found pictures of stuff spewing out of these electromagnetic vehicles into the rings of Saturn and bloody making them or extending them. And what is said to be in the rings of Saturn, I guess thus that's why we can see them, is like ice and stuff. I think, and I would suggest that eventually they will realize that there is a crystal substance being put into those rings that has a dramatic impact on their ability to transmit information. In 2009, NASA released this picture, which is a ring around Saturn, which is from 3.7 million miles out to 7.4 million, and that ring could encompass 1 billion Earths. I suggest that There are rings that we can see, but there are sound rings that we can't see that are coming out across, and we're picking them up. They make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience. The Saturn matrix, as I call it, is a frequency band which we are decoding as a fake reality. And I suggest, my view, we will find that the edge of that frequency band is what we call the speed of light. And beyond it, you go out of the matrix. And when all the genetic tinkering that the ancients talked about went on, the human form was being manipulated to be tuned in to receive and transmit within the frequency band of this Saturn broadcast, and pulling people from a heart state beyond the matrix into an emotional point of interaction massively in the matrix was a major way of tuning us into this fake reality. We talk about people who don't think for themselves as being in the box. Maybe we ought to say that they're in the cube. And they want to shut the heart down, and they have to so many people, because it takes us beyond the bounds of time and space, beyond the matrix.